Hi, and welcome to another Watchlist, my weekly rundown of what I've been watching and what I've been up to. And again, 5 movies this week. 5 very diverse and different movies from right across the spectrum of cinema, or interest in cinema. And the first one up is the recent BFI release of Romeo is Bleeding, starring Gary Oldman as a bent cop, really, who finds himself caught in between the mafia, a female assassin, and his day job, and his life. It's very much a 1990s neo-noir, kind of in the early style of the Quentin Tarantino True Romance style of film, where you have a pretty grungy looking city, you have a pretty grungy feeling theme, and one that produces sort of mixed results, I think, for Romeo is Bleeding. Romeo is Bleeding is a film that I would consider to be sort of uneven in places. Guy Oldman is known for being a terrific actor, and, well, this is touted as being one of his real great breakout roles, but for me, this is a bit of Guy Oldman overacting shit out of stuff. If I'm honest, he hams it up way too much. That kind of quivering wreck that he becomes, is very effective on screen. But maybe I've seen too much Guy Oldman. Maybe watching it in retrospect, haven't seen so much of it, is just too much. And he plays it a bit too seriously than he does maybe in other things such as The Fifth Element, etc. So, Romeo is Bleeding, while a really interesting movie, as Guy Oldman gets caught between, this female assassin played by Lena Olin, who is just terrific. She's dynamiting the screen every time you see her. I think she realises what her character is and the kind of foil that it plays to Guy Oldman's character, because he's a man who's married, but he's got other women on the go, and he's a bit of a womanizer, and I just feel like his character's played a bit too straight for what the film entails. It has lots of twists and turns. Roy Scheider plays the mafia boss that he's kind of working for and doing his bidding. So if you like a kind of violent neo-noir 90s film, then Romeo is Bleeding is just for you. Extras wise in the disc, there is a Zoom interview with the director Peter Medak, who talks about his filmography and his progression, his inspirations from earlier on to later on. It's a one-sided interview, and as such, with it being about 45 minutes long, I think it takes a while to, or it doesn't hold the attention nearly as much, even though what he says is really interesting. The booklet, I think, is filled with three good essays in it, but the highlight for me is Alexandra and Nicholas Hiller's commentary. I mean, I think her commentaries are really starting, and her work and video essays are really starting to stand out in the scene. And while they always have a very much a female slant on things, I think the most interesting character in this film is Lena Olin's character, and she is the real strength of the film. There's also a really good performance by Juliette Lewis, and then also a great performance by Gary Oldman's wife, and how that ties into the Harvey Weinstein case and what happened subsequently in more recent times. So Romeo is Bleeding, really interesting film to start off with, and a good 7 out of 10 film, maybe elevated to 7.5, 8 by the extras and the release that's been put together. We have a Criterion release second up here, and it is Larissa Shepitko's The Ascent, a Criterion release of a 1977 Belarusian film about the war. I mean, I've talked about a lot of war films recently on the watch list, and this is no different. This is a part of Russia that's been taken over by the Nazis, and we start off with 2 soldiers that are part of a camp of partisans, as they're called, who leave the camp to find some supplies and food in the wilderness. Now, you really get set the scene of the environment that they're in here, because it's very, very white. The world is very snow covered, with it being Russia, and the people and the foliage and the houses are really the only contrast to that. They stick out in this blank landscape. Now, as those two soldiers get separated, they have two different personalities. One seems like a go-getter, the other one seems a bit afraid, maybe headstrong. But this is where the film really plays into its strengths, because the two characters both change throughout the period of the film, depending on their reaction to the circumstances they're brought into. So, how they respond to capture, how they respond to people who are aiding their war effort, who are against the war effort, and how they kind of respond to that, how their psyche responds to it, how they grow into themselves or into the things, their belief systems that they see. There are some incredible performances in this, and I think the greatest strength of the film is how those personalities connect to the overarching themes of Shepitko, what she was trying to do. There is no denying that there is a spirituality to this movie that comes more and more to the fore as the film progresses. But how you feel connected and empathise with every single one of the characters in here is a real strength. From the people that you really can't stand, to the people that you're rooting for, to the people that you're rooting against. You feel something for all of them, and it's a real masterful piece of filmmaking. And one that, when I'd heard was very good, as the film progressed, it just won me over more and more and more and more. It's an incredible release by Criterion, as it normally is. There's a great fold-out pamphlet-y, leaflety booklet, which I'm not a great fan of, holding and going through, but this was quite easy to read. There is an interview with Anton Klimov, who's Larsa Shepitko's son. Klimov, you may recognise the name, also happens to be the son of Ellen Klimov, who did come and see the recent release as well. They were married, and he talks about the experience of both his father and his mother, and how their filmmaking journey impacted his upbringing and their belief system. And then we have select scene commentary. You have some short films as well. It's an absolute stacked release, and one that is very, very easy to recommend for anybody watching. So The Ascent from Criterion, absolutely terrific. Next up is an indicator disc, and one that's again a 1990s movie, 1993, and it is again another purity kind of piece, because this one is the story of Geronimo, an American legend. A film by Walter Hill that tells the story of Geronimo, a famous Native American warrior who was a thorn in the side of the Americans who are trying to resettle in the west of America, trying to take over the land and infringing upon the Native American land that is there. And I'm not sure whether I'd seen Geronimo beforehand, but certainly there are a lot of films that are similar-ish in theme that I've seen over the years. But this one very much centres on the relationship of the Native Americans to one or two of the American soldiers. Primarily that played by Jason Patric and a very, very young Matt Damon. And how Jason Patric's character, he's predisposed to do this in partnership with the Native Americans. The changes are coming in the country or in the system, and he can see it coming, but he wants to set things up so that it's an amiable thing and it doesn't end in murder. Whereas Geronimo is very much fighting against the white man, against the Americans coming here, led by Gene Hackman as a leading American officer. The central performance of Geronimo by Wes Studi is really one of the strengths of the film, and his relationship with Jason Patric really is something that develops quite strongly, I think, throughout the entire movie. It's a movie that if you go and look up, you'll not see much love for it. I think maybe slight historical inaccuracies play into that. Certainly it's dramatised for the screen, but I think you get a good sense of what was important around that time, of what really happened around that time, and ultimately how you know how these things ended up. You maybe probably don't know exactly how the story ended up, but we see the result of what happened in modern day society. And it's hard not to draw parallels between what happened in Geronimo, and even though it was a 1993 film, and how those themes are still relevant. I feel like I say that every single week, is that a lot of these films hold such sway and strength to this day that those things of intolerance and ignorance are still very much prevalent here. And as usual, you have an absolutely terrific release. Gorgeous artwork. Like I always say, like, the artwork in indicator releases is something to behold. You have a really cracking booklet. I really love the writing in that as well. And you have some great interviews, both with Wes Studi. You have some interviews with Walter Hill. You have an interview with Ry Cooder, who's done the music for this as well, which is just sits along the background and just fits the scene so well. And in terms of stunts, etc., I was surprised. Some of the horse stunts, I think, are absolutely tremendous. I didn't see an awful lot of people talk about that in here, but you know, some of the writing about how they adapted the screenplay and how they put that together, it's really, really interesting. I do love how Indicator aren't just one note in their essays or the work that they put together. I think I heard was it Criterion now talking about the fact that Indicator have really strong editing, and they always tend to put something different in their essays, and it's really to be commended and something that I really, really enjoyed. Second last is a label I don't talk a lot about, and that is the HMV Premium Collection, which I think is probably Warner Archive in America. And this one is a 1947 picture. It's Possessed, starring Joan Crawford and Van Heflin. It tells the story of Joan Crawford, who is pretty much besotted by a character called David Sutton, played by Van Heflin, and how she is attracted to him, and when they break up, she does not take it well at all. It seems like she goes and exists about her day-to-day life just well, but she vows to make his life a misery. And as events happen to that very rich family, and there's a mystery evolves around the death of the wife. You're not really sure how that fits into the rest of the story. There's some questioning in it as Joan Crawford's character starts to devolve and starts to fall apart. And while this is seen primarily as one of Joan Crawford's great performances, in fact, she received an Oscar nomination for it, I couldn't help but feeling it again was a bit hammy. I feel like Joan Crawford overacted it. You know, I've seen lots of films of Joan Crawford now where she plays that very cool, dominant, strong woman, and she is a dominant, strong woman here, but again, this flits of character between too much and not enough just didn't sit quite well. Maybe I've seen it too many times, and it's the one thing that really lets the film down for me, which is surprising considering it was Oscar nominated. Some of the other performances of the rich family really contrast very nicely with her, and including Van Heflin, who I think is very straightforward, calm, never gets too much riled performance, is something that really balances out her quite well, and actually in the end makes the film work, even given my misgivings about Crawford's performance. It is overacted, sure, but it is still very effective in the scheme of these releases. And you know, I'll watch it again. I did enjoy it. It is something that I had plenty of time for and had, you know, something to really grab hold on to. Me and the wife both watched it and she thought it was quite good, so you know, always something that we can watch together and see that way. So that is Possessed from HMV, and I think it's one of the most recent releases as well, but it's something that I wanted to pick up and watch. So that was that. And then last tonight is another Criterion film, and another recent release. This one is Ousmane Sembène's Mandabi, or what is known as The Money Order. And The Money Order, or A Money Order, is the theme of what Mandabi is. It's set in Senegal, and it tells the story of Ibrahim Dieng, who's a man who's no employment. He has 2 wives, it appears by, but he's a very holy man. Spot the dichotomy there. And he receives from his nephew a money order for a considerable amount of money. 25,000 francs he receives. His nephew has left Senegal to go work in France, and he sends Dieng the money for him to cash and distribute between himself and his family and keep some for his nephew. It's a film that basically details about how impossible it seems for him to just do that. Not only when the people around him find out about the money order are they all wanting their cut, they see him as being a man of privilege or of wealth. And Abraham he's a very honest, incredibly honest man. For all of his lack of stature, for all of his lack of money, he wants to do the right thing by everybody. He wants to do things well for people. And he is thwarted it at every attempt by other people, by their greed, and by the system that was put in front of them. And a lot of this is touched in the extras, where they talk about the political situation at the time. This is made in 1968, and it's not long after Senegal was given its independence from the French state, and how the systems were not set up for this duality of people who were coming to Senegal from France and living their life, where there was maybe some wealth and privilege, and the people who were left behind, of whom Yang is one. So a really interesting watch, and one that starts off quite, you don't know really where it's going in any ways, and at the end becomes extremely difficult to watch as you see people take advantage of Abraham, and it ultimately becomes a bit of a satire into the whole system and how that all plays out for him. So, like, fascinating to watch. Obviously extremely different from what you'll normally see, and again a great credit to Criterion themselves for releasing it, because again, not the type of thing that I would have seen, although in June in the UK it's getting a release from Studio Canal and their Village World Cinema line, and I think it's one you should definitely pick up, because it's not only very good, but it is unlike most other things that you will see around that time. So that's my watch list for the week. I hope you've got some good recommendations for things to watch there that I've been going through. And as usual, let me know what you've been watching yourself. Always great to hear and see what you've been watching. I've got to prepare for a couple of those new series that I put a post up about in my channel update recently. I'll stick a link up there if you haven't seen it, so you can check it out. But aside from that, I'll catch you next time. Speak to you then. Bye.